back, and we're getting ready to move into our conversation for today. Of course, it has been a very serious area of conversation since last year, and of course compounded by the fact that we've seen quite a number of gang-related murders taking place just over the past couple days. So we're going to have a conversation now with social researcher Nelma Mortis. Of course, Nelma was involved in the original study done by Dr. Herbert Gale on the crime situation in Belize and the engagement of our young boys and men. And further to that, the publication of the book, Like a Bushfire. So good morning, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you.
Firstly, I must say to you, Nelma, Happy New Year. It's a brand new year, and we're looking forward to this 2017. It is a wide topic, and a lot of people are affected by it. As a matter of fact, the entire country, the entire world, when it comes to crime situation, but focusing here at home, reflection on the crime situation here in Belize. The big question is, where do we start?
I'm glad that you pointed out that all of us are being affected.
Yeah.
That is a key thing to pay attention to, because it simply speaks to the velocity of the crime that we have here. We are a very small country. You often hear people say, in other countries it is worse, or you want to be in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan and Sudan and those places, but our space is very small. So even if you're not involved in the situation, you have relationship with people that are very close to you, and their people are dying, and human, we share each other emotions. So that is something we need to understand, that violence is a force that it's uncontainable. There is no way you cannot avoid the emotions of it. Yeah. Your question now is, where do we start? It's not where do we start, because like Marlene, before we began the discussion, we're saying these things over and over. And we may have to continue saying it's very controversial. People become very territorial. People become very defensive. Nobody wants to hear it. However, the gang, the blaming of the gang and the situation of the gang is like we're dodging away from the itmost problem. The itmost problem of inequality that we still have, the lack of education and training, the lack of the economics and work that is not there. So unless we, like I said, unless we attend to the root, we are still treating the leaves.
Yeah.
We have to address the root, but that comes with a cost, and it is something that countries in the Caribbean, in this hemisphere, tend to dodge away from.
Now, it's always a good opportunity to have you here to speak about your research, because essentially your work with Dr. Herbert Gale, and I believe Greg Nunez as well, is one of the few documented evidence-based report that we have looking at our crime situation. And it's very complex, because you have people who are involved in activities now. There are root problems from their childhood which you can't undo, but there are actions that are taking place affecting the larger society. So I wanna ask a different version to what John was saying. There are mediation efforts in place. The police are now talking about maintaining the new policing style and possibly going back to old policing style, whatever that means. But if we are to mitigate this problem, is it a matter of intervention, or being able to stop those who may be inclined to gang involvement from getting into gangs and continuing the actions?
Excellent question and an overall thing. There are two. One of the things we are still at that point where we are dodging away from what the research is saying. Yeah. The research brings some kind of evidence, some kind of truth that slap us in our face, and we want to deny it. Even though as human beings, right in our own very experience, we can put pieces together and make assumptions about certain things. So that is something that we have to understand, that research is something that is necessary for us to do the right thing.
You have to understand the problem.
Yes, and we in Belize, we are very fortunate to have this piece of research. Let me tell you why. My passion in what I am doing, I continue reading and doing my own research, searching for answers to be able to assist my country. And it is something that is seldom you can find actual research on this particular area of gang violence. And why? Because it is a very sensitive issue. You will not get the data, but we were fortunate to get some very sensitive but well-informed data, and we did a lot of triangulation because we did not get data from one source and make a conclusion and say, yeah, this is what is happening in Belize. No, we had to do a lot of triangulation. That was the most frustrating part of the experience doing the research. So we have to pay attention that research is there. Now, there are two, in terms of what Marlene, specifically the core of Marlene's question, there are two types of interventions. You have the first generation intervention, the second generation intervention. In this hemisphere, urban violence is becoming predominant. We have been growing exponentially, and we were not prepared for it. We are in transition, but you have to manage transition. We can see Belize City. When I hear people say, oh, when I'm by Freetown Road where Kelly Street, they used to say that is where Belize City stopped. All of Kings Park was swamp. Now Kings Park is well developed. Now if you go on south side, all that area, Port Loyola, that area of Collet, people are not living on a piece of land, they are living on a swamp. And I know politicians do not like us to air out these things, but we have to air it out. We have to address it. We have to face the truth. If we don't face the truth, we will not correct our situation. So with urban violence comes this situation of violence, because in urban space, resources are scarce, jobs are scarce. And you have young men who, you strip a man of his dignity, strip him of that opportunity to provide and to become a hunter for his family. He will turn to violence. That is the basic thing there. He will turn to violence to survive. And they survive without living in hope. That's why when I said that, it simply means that I'm telling you that education is very important. Education will give them a diversion away from what it is they're doing, and to provide for them more opportunity. However, there is also another complex problem to that, because every year we produce maybe 20,000 graduates from fourth form. But if you don't have job creation,
then where do you go?
Just a small percentage of that attends junior college, and some attend university outside of Belize City, those that the parents can afford. So when we are talking about the intervention and so forth, it is very complex. It is development issues, and those are the things that we have to manage. We have to look at it, but it begins with planning. Now we have some lofty good plans, but then we don't execute. As soon as the plan is finished, we basically, well, I should not say that, because there are lots of interventions going on.
Yes.
But I think what we don't do is a lot of the monitoring and evaluation to see how impactful, to see what works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing. Now, we are still at the point of first generation intervention, where repression is the answer. Repression is the thing that we put at the forefront to hide behind the other root causes.
So first generation is essentially trying to get at those who are currently involved in criminal activity.
Not necessarily. First generation is the crackdown. The same
They're
thing
trying
that
to stop it.
Yes, to stop it. To put suppression, to put heavy policing in areas where it is flooded and so forth. Nothing is wrong with that. However, you have to have a parallel working along with it, which is basically the preventative. You asked about those people who, the young generation, you want to stop that. But you cannot just work on preventative if you don't work on the rehabilitative section of it. There are people already who are seasoning that. So you have to try and correct that situation over here, because this same group over here, you're working strongly over here with the preventative, but you're not addressing the ones over here. These same will still come and kill your programs and your efforts that you are doing in the preventative. So it requires a very comprehensive, a very multi-sectorial, intersectorial, and it needs leadership.
Now, I think that is such a critical point to look at, because we have spoken, and I said this earlier this week on the show when we came back after the new year, that there are a lot of social programs that are currently ongoing. Not all are widely publicized. We don't always report on it in the media, but I know from personal experience that there's always an agency or agencies involved in working with young people who are at risk, vulnerable, or engaged in crime. My question is, what's your opinion in terms of being able to assess the effectiveness of these programs? There's heavy funding that goes in, local and international, in trying to address the situation of crime and preventing crime. We look at murder statistics very literal. You know, is it 2 more than last year, 2 less than last year, 5 less than last year? We don't question how many people actually survived in the hospital to say maybe it's a healthcare system that has done well. But we don't look at whether or not we are effective in being able to actually make some kind of dent in the number of violent incidents that we see. Is it perhaps time to do a thorough analysis of what is being done, what has been effective, and where we need to invest our energies?
Excellent. 2 points you brought out there. 1, the monitoring and evaluation. I don't know if we do not have the expertise. And it's not only Belize. So when we talk, we're talking in the context. I was reading about Central America study, which look at Honduras, El Salvador, the whole little area, Costa Rica,
and they've
Nicaragua.
got serious problems.
And they have tried a lot of the second generation, which would be the ones that address the at-risk, find alternative education and so forth. But the issue there is also, to determine impact, is the lack of monitoring and evaluation. Putting indicators to help them to understand, okay, this was completed, this is something that I've overcome. I don't know if we don't have the expertise or the training enough.
Or the human resources.
Or human resources enough to be able to determine that. So that is something that we have to strengthen. The monitoring and evaluation to determine impact. The second part of your question refers to the
fact that we haven't, whether or not we need to do a thorough analysis to decide where our energies are best invested.
All right. The point that I wanted to bring out of that is, you said it, we look at murder statistics and we look at it literally. And we determine that if we drop 10 murder less this year, we have improved, or we are improving. Or there's a month when there is no murder, so we can celebrate that. We need to analyze our murder statistics better. Greg and I, even before you all invited us, we keep track and we love our country. We do it a lot of passion. So we were looking at 2016, and I know there's alarm, there is panic. That moral panic came into place. I guess one of the reasons why you have me sitting here, but nothing is wrong with the media keeping the conversation going.
Well, it has to go.
I am going to encourage you all to keep the conversation going, because each time this happens, we do a little preempt of analyzing, which helps those who are working on the ground. So this is what you're doing. I really commend. The murder situation that went into New Year's, any violent country, and violent expert will tell you this: Christmas, New Year's, August when school is opening, murder rates will increase. And you can determine the rest from there, why that is so.
Is it financial
I was just
stresses?
about to ask.
Economics.
Yeah.
Economics, basic economics. So last year, the crime situation is just a continuum of last year. It's a continuum. It's not something for us to be frightened about.
Yeah.
However,
Go ahead.
However, 2016, and this is critical, I know people will get defensive about this, but the number of shootings, when we look at crime, when we look at violence, we cannot only determine by the fatalities. We have to look at the number of shootings, the number of fatalities, and in comparison to the murder rate.
And that's something I believe I've asked the police department on the show before, because we don't hear, if you're talking gang-related crimes, there are the fatalities. There are those who are injured and were able to survive. And if you talk to anybody who lives in particular areas, they'll tell you how often they hear gunshots. So the shots don't always meet their target. But I consider that a threat to person's security. If you live in that area and you're fearful of walking because there may be a spray of bullets, then that is considered, to me, and that's, I'm not an expert in violence or crime or gang-related activity, to be an incident as well. And we don't have that measurement to say if there are shootings every night in one area, whether somebody is hit or somebody dies or nobody gets any kind of injury.
All of that speaks to police efficacy. And that comes back to the mode that we use, the heavy policing in Belize City. I don't know if you all have been paying attention, but since 2010, the police department has increased. I saw, I think it's Major Jones put it up. I was just scanning through Facebook last night, and he was saying it is even bigger than Coast Guard and BDF now. Well, I guess that's because of need. But if you look at the comparison, the ratio of police to citizen, we have the highest. Not even England has that ratio.
The amount of people.
And yes, there's a formula to determine how many police per 100,000 population. So ours is very, 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 very high. But in addition to that, we swamped the Belize district itself because of the crime situation. I guess this is our answer to the crime situation, has more police officers than anywhere else. So the Belize City is saturated. Belize City, the Belize district is saturated with police officers. What does that mean? And I could recall we used this analogy years ago. This cup is filled with water. We drop something in there. What will happen? The water will splash out. So that creates violence in places that you would not have seen traditionally being violent. Outskirts,
we had ACP Broster saying that last night in the news.
San Pedro the other day, I work in San Pedro, Burrell Boom, Hattieville. The other day there was a connection, and this is pattern. This is pattern and facts. Dan Grigga, Stan Creek, you're well aware, Marlene. So these are some of the things we need to analyze carefully. Somebody has to do it. And then expose it so that we re-examine, and this is what we have to continuously do. We will not get a solution right now because it took us many years to be where we are at. Remember I said it's a transition period, but we have to manage it. But we have to be also open and welcoming and stop being controversial and territorial about it. And we have to listen to experts. We love our country. We don't really want to bring down no part. This is not about or you or me. This is about us.
But you strike a nerve there, because you're right. If you put something in a glass filled with water, it will spill out. And so therefore, these are the reasons why we see things happening elsewhere rather than right here in Belize City, which is actually the focus. One of the points Marlene brought up was the point of organizations such as Youth for the Future, which came about to eventually try and provide these guys with bread, so that they could eventually take themselves out of the criminal situation and try to provide for their families. We see a lot of this popping up now, and so far, it's to a lot of people it might not be working. What is the research saying? Should we put more out there so as to try and get these guys off the streets and try to provide for their home? Is the research saying anything about this?
Okay, again, approach. Whatever we're doing has to be sustainable. 1. 2, we cannot provide the same situation of give them a fish a day and then expect that that is sufficient. A lot of these, this is sensitive issue. A lot of these young men are in some serious mental state. So this situation is expensive, and we, this generation, my generation, allow the one behind to be where we are at. That requires a more comprehensive approach. They have to think about the mental health of these young men, apart from providing the job. Even when you provide them with job, they are not skilled enough. They are not skilled enough, so that requires for you to work with them. You have to address their mental health, their mental state. The studies show that the serial, if they have done a lot of the killings before, they're not mentally stable, and that's easy to determine. That's easy to determine by body reading, profiling, which I think the police need some more training in terms of. My spouse was speaking to me just yesterday, and he's saying, I'm passing through this checkpoint, because right now checkpoint, they're all over the place.
Yes.
And he said to the police officer, so why are they overworking you? He has military background, and so he said, you think if I'm passing through this checkpoint, if I see you there, I'll pass through this checkpoint if I'm not legitimate? He said he gave him his license. He said, what I need for teaching another how to profile. Because we are being harassed because of the policing situation. We, the legitimate individuals, get harassed, or we feel like we are being harassed. Maybe it's...
Or we feel inconvenienced, or
maybe
many
it's
different
legitimate.
things.
Because sometimes I'm going to work and I'm like 5 minutes away from work and I have to go through this checkpoint.
Now, and that's a key point, because what we find, it's an interesting situation, and I think social researchers or people who can analyze this type of situation can give us better clarity. People are concerned about the crime. People in Belize City, people countrywide are concerned. Outside of Belize City, we know that there tends to be a fear about coming into the city. Within Belize City, we say it's a very bad situation, and we're fearful of certain areas that we'll go in. But then there still is this kind of disassociation that takes place. This them and us. And so while we recognize the problem, it's not a problem that we identify with or see ourselves as a part of the solution. How important is it that a community recognizes how, whether I live in an area that is furthest away from the crime, I still have a role to play in being able to address the situation? Or do we? Maybe that's a better question.
Our research picked up on that, particularly in saying there is no way you can boast about anything on South Side or boast on North Side, because the North Side is a subsidiary of the South Side groups.
Yes.
That's not an if nor a but a me, and I'm sure the police officers know that. We have to work in collaboration. And now the extension is the rural, the peripheral areas. Because when you drop the big stone in the water, it spills all over. So it means collaboration. It is, we are not isolated, but that is what is happening. We are all in prison because we are saying we don't want to be on that side of the city, and the city belongs to all of us. The city is our space. And some of us, we even put up bigger fences. Some of us, we move in the urban area. But trust me, when scarcity happen here, we're going that way. They will go and find it. And that's where things like home invasion and so forth
It's true.
comes into play. So we cannot shy away from, and that's what we are doing. We, the educated, we, the elite, we, the middle class, upper class, working class, we tend to shy away from it. But it will affect us eventually. We are living, it's like a lifeboat. We are using lifeboat instead of spaceship.
Yeah.
If we're in a spaceship and we're up there, have one lee buzz, you know something, you have to address that because you'll blow up there. But right now we use the lifeboat analogy where you sink or swim.
Yeah.
Only the few who could swim will survive.
You know, and especially when it comes to the economical aspect of our country, one of the things people will tell you outright, I am not going to Belize City to do my shopping. Reason being is because I might just be robbed, I might just get shot, and anybody could tell you, hey, crime is everywhere, but we hear about it a lot in Belize City. Thus, taking some of the money out of Belize City and then getting things on the rise. What does this do for our communities?
I have colleagues who come in and when they are here, they tell you they want to get out back quick. They come here for meetings and they are not comfortable. They want to get out of the city. That is a sad situation. That speaks again to development. That speaks again to government paying attention to rural development to help mitigate some of the issues that we have. I can attest to a group that was moved from a certain area here in Belize City and went in another certain area in another district, and things have changed for them.
Now, I want to talk about two issues, and they're very large, similar, but they have different issues. One is looking at the perception or the reality of injustices in the country. And I remember this from the research. I remember you guys speaking about it, and I guess this is where you say sometimes, you step on a few toes when you see things like this. If I am poor and living in an area that is considered gang-ridden, crime-ridden, whatever terminology is put on it, or hotspot, and I am being held accountable for a stick of weed, or my entire family is being hauled in for a bust in the yard, and I see reports in the media where persons who have done more serious or more grave crimes being able to get off, being able to have more leniency. When I see people who are living very good lives and perhaps there's some kind of shady business that is taking place there, but I still struggle to send my children to school. The injustices that we see in our country affect the crime situation as well. Now, that's not something we like to look in the mirror and acknowledge that we see. But how does it affect the individuals who are involved in criminal activity?
Everything is psychological for everybody. That's a major weakness. And let me say this. The high violence is associated with weak, fragile state.
Yeah.
Any researcher to pick up will tell you that it is associated. And one of the key things is even our conviction rate. If you have low conviction rate, it gives me the opportunity, not that you're qualified, but it gives me the opportunity to try again. Why you think one gangster would have a serial of what it is that they're doing?
Yeah.
So in our research, we have picked up, because it's not only the police department, but the justice system itself is weak and is not the conviction rate. But everything has an effect on the next, because whatever the police prepared to take to the justice system to be able to determine conviction, that system there needs strengthening.
Now, there is also, and I think it's a delicate situation. We don't want to know at times who or why criminals do what they do. Why does a young man with children, with family, pick up a gun, go and shoot their target, possibly innocent people along the way. We simply want them convicted and put in jail. But talk to us about who these individuals are and some of the reasons based on your research that you have found that lead these young men to these type of activities.
Okay, I think when I opened the conversation, I was speaking about the fact that we use the gangs, or the word gang, or the situation of crime, to hide behind and avoid the utmost problem, which is that of inequality. And when I mean inequality, I'm talking about the level of poverty that we have. Not that, and let me make this clear, not that we are associating, or there's a association that because you are poor, that you will become a criminal. Please dispel that myth. However, the research is showing that there is a strong correlation there. Why? Because first of all, and I said it earlier again, strip a man of his dignity to be able to hunt, get food for his family, strip him of his manhood, and he will resort to violent act to become a man, so that you can give him the respect that he has. Boys, men are wired that way. That's how God created. If you have a problem with that, blame God. They are created to be provider, to be priests for their family, and to protect their family. And if they cannot do that, they will resort to violence. So it begins right there. And for some of these boys who become this, you could go do the research and the interview all over again. They come from homes that are broken, that are not conducive, not giving them the love and the attention. And so what will happen? They will resort to going at one, if the home is lack of food, and two, if the home does not provide that shelter of love for them, they will resort to the street. They will do it. They have to do it. It's a way of survival. Simple survival. You put yourself, go way back to that time. And if you're hungry and you not get love, you won't find it in some other, you don't get it legitimately, so you're going. And these are the young men or the children that gangs that are recruited as a part of the gangs, they find a space in that illegitimate group to feel that they belong and that they are worth something.
One of the things that I want to get to the media when it comes to this, on the media when it comes to this, because, and branching out, especially in the US, you hear so much about school shootings, and following the media putting this out there, you hear about a series thereafter of school shootings. Let's get back home. Do you think that these guys are doing this so as to eventually send message to other gang members, or are actually doing this just for a boost because of them being on the media?
The media has an ethical responsibility, and I've been saying this from 2010. It depends on, and yesterday we were in a discussion with my colleagues, and we were discussing this kind of thing. We have seen improvement. I must commend, is he Superintendent Chester Williams, when he said to one of you media personnel, leave the man to die in dignity. I won't expose his other part of his life and so forth and so forth. That's a beginning, because that never used to happen. Even the fact that you go on the street and you do the camera image that they're on the ground dead in the blood. So if you can't get the body, you get the blood. There are several things that you all have to take into consideration there. When you do that, when you expose it like that, security issues are involved there. Security for the family. We tend to pay a lot of attention to the victim that is already gone. We can't do nothing more about it, but bury them in dignity. But then we have to remember that they have surviving people. So that is one area. We go in and we don't give them that opportunity to grieve. We push the camera in their faces and say, how do you feel? And what is happening? Man, you just lost someone by death, by shooting. So these are some of the things we as a society, that's why we said this problem is not My problem, it is not yours, it's not the police, it's not education, it's everybody's problem.
Yeah.
So we have to pay attention. I'm glad that you brought that up. So that's another key thing that we have to pay attention to. How and how we report.
And I agree with you. I think one of the things too that I find very interesting is what people are interested in. Because we have a policy here that we won't show, we shouldn't show, bodies on the ground. We're not going to show you the blood and gore and counting bullets and whatnot. But it's amazing on a personal level how many times I hear people say, oh, no, show the good stuff. Oh, no, show this. Oh, no, show that. And I'm fascinated to try to understand, or I would really love to understand why it's so important to people who are not even involved in these type of activities, why they need to see that type of gore.
It's sensationalism. We were discussing this recently too. You hear Samson is 7, Samson is 7, Samson is 7, and they keep the commercial keep repeating till eventually you want a Samson is 7. That's how the brain works. And in people in the media world knows and understand that has an impact on the brain. Yeah. So that is the situation there. As human beings, we tend to gravitate towards negative. Too. Yeah. And we don't recognize that some of our action, my boss was just pointing this to us. She was saying, sometimes your action, you don't realize that your action, you might not mean anything, but your action affect the other person beside you or around you. So you have to be cognizant of all of these things when you're reporting. Yeah. Now, investigative journalism is another area that has to be strengthened. Yes. It's what you report. Like sometimes, like yesterday, one of my colleagues said that when her sister got killed, they interviewed a neighbor who is like a friend, sister, and they put sister under the name of the person when there is no biological connection. So those are some of the improvements that can be made in the media. I'm glad you all pay attention to that today.
Well, we are always about improving ourselves
and being
too,
open.
And I think one of the things is that we are all looking at how to address this situation in a way that will benefit the wider society. Yes. And I know that we have emphasized quite a bit on the reasons and what we're not doing. And just to close off, if we can round off the conversation looking solution-oriented. What do we need to be doing at this time? Whether I am just a regular citizen who sits in awe in front of the TV when the news comes on, whether I am someone who lives in an area but not involved, or whether I'm a family member who does have somebody involved in gang activity. What do we need to be doing at this point?
It's everybody's responsibility. And we have to make a conscious effort. In fact, it's our consciousness of being conscious of what is occurring around us. Yeah. And we have to improve on our social love, look out for each other. Yeah. Right now there's a trend, and I don't know if you all pay attention to it, but even the people who are not involved in gangs, the tension and the division that is happening among us.
That is true.
That has that kind of impact there is no way that will affect the younger generation. And they can read our body language, they can read, even though we may think that it is not observant to them, they observe it. So things like those, we have to be conscious of. We have to be more family oriented. And when I say, that's another area we should have spent some time on, because the family is the core. Yes. If we don't have strong family, we won't have a strong community. If we don't have strong community, the nation will not be strong. Yeah. So we have to pay attention and have each other be our brother's keeper.
All right. Well, Nelma, thank you so much for joining us this morning to be able to once again look at some of the core issues when we talk about crime. And we hope that we've added perspective to the issue for our viewers. All right?
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're shifting to our resolution week theme. And we're going to be talking about setting goals for life results. So stay tuned.